After getting into a car with her former friend, a teen girl disappears and is never heard from again. We are breaking down this chilling story from the investigation to the evidence to what happened in trial, all with former FBI agent Bobby Chacon. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. I'm going to tell you a story, and many of these details are laid out in a prosecutor's trial brief in this case. But we go back to November 7th, 2017, out in Moreno Valley, California. We have 16-year-old Aranda Briones, and that morning she apparently decided not to go to school, rather skip class, hang out with her friends at a nearby park. But there was a sheriff's school resource officer who was looking for truants, and he approaches the teens, and they all reportedly run away. And one of those people there was Owen Shover, and reportedly he had a handgun on him. So seemingly out of fear of getting caught, he apparently tosses the gun to Aranda, telling her to hide it for him, and she just ends up throwing it into a drainage canal out of fear. So that sheriff's officer sees this, catches her, and she admits, including to the school administrators, that Shover had the gun and told her to toss it. So what happens? Aranda and Shover are both expelled. They have to enroll in continuation schools. Shover actually moves out of his mom's place, ends up living with his father, and authorities say Shover was furious at Aranda for what she did to him, and he ended up taking out his revenge on her 2 years later. Evidence shows through social media messages that he tried to buy a gun between November 18th and January 2019, and guess what? He ends up getting one. January 12th, 2019, authorities say he texted Aranda to come meet with him, that he was going to be making a series of drug deals and that he was planning to rob drug dealers. She apparently agrees, gets into his car on January 13th, 2019, and apparently two witnesses see her get in that car. And another way that we know that she was in the car at this time is because she posted on social media pictures of her in Shover's car. But authorities say this was when Aranda was never seen again. They say Shover killed her. And to this day, her remains have never been found. According to Riverside District Attorney Mike Hestron, this became a homicide investigation because detectives found extensive and compelling evidence that the defendant, Owen Shover, meticulously planned and carried out the murder of Aranda. So this is part one of the story. For part two, I want to bring on right now attorney and former FBI agent Bobby Chacon. Bobby, thank you so much for coming on. We haven't even gotten to all the other evidence and what happens next in the story. But first, my question to you is, how does he get a gun? How does he get a gun again after everything that happened?
Well, I mean, look, he's not he had a gun originally, so he actually knows how to obtain weapons. These are black market weapons that are sold on the street all the time between gang members, drug dealers. In this country, it's a lot easier to get an illegal gun than a legal gun in some places. And so here in California, there is a pretty extensive gang problem. And these gangs trade in guns just like they trade in drugs. And so he's a guy who already had a gun in the original incident. And then, once he had to get rid of that one, in the way you described, then he went about trying to find another one. And it took him a couple of weeks, but that's not unusual here. But yeah, all over the country, I think, certainly when I went to New York City, it was pretty easy to obtain an illegal weapon. And here in California is no different.
And by the way, we don't know definitively if he used the gun on Aranda because we don't have her body. We don't have an autopsy report. We don't know definitively. I will say, going back to what I laid out, social media posting, so the fact that she apparently took photos while she was in the car, that has become such a key piece of evidence now in investigation. Like the way we talked about cell phone data, and I'll get into that in a second too, but social media now has become a way, right, Bobby, to track people's locations, their movements. In a way, we say everybody posts on social media, but sometimes it can be key evidence.
Oh, these kids live. I mean, these are young people, right? These kids live on their phones. It's TikTok, it's Snapchat, it's Instagram stories. right? And she selfies herself with this guy in the car saying, I'm with my homie. You know, this is one of those things that kids live on these phones, and you're going to be able to find a lot about their lives right up to the moment if they disappear or whatever happens to them. I mean, they live moment to moment on these phones.
Such a sad case that we see too often. But as I say, it's important to get these stories out there, not only expose what happened with these victims, but maybe to provide a warning to those in similar situations. And the truth is, we are able to continually do that. We're able to continually bring you these stories in large part because of the support that we get from our sponsors. And I'd like to quickly call one out, one of our great partners who actually does something that is really cool that you guys will probably like. It's called Upside, and it is a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. So when I fill up my tank, I can use Upside and get cash back. And yes, this is actual real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. So once you have the Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside at places like Shell and Exxon and Taco Bell. There's tons of places. And you pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app and you get paid. So to find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code Sidebar and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Okay, let's get back into it. I talked about cell phone data. So actually on that note, authorities were able to use cell phone data and surveillance footage on city cameras and security cameras to track Shover's car. And it appears the car was around the Box Springs mountain for about 20 minutes. And then at around 6 p.m., the car turns towards the San Bernardino area and it heads towards a mobile home park. Bobby, again, talking about evidence, the cameras are everywhere now. It becomes increasingly difficult for people to stay out of sight, right?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about building timelines, and the cameras help you build that timeline. They show you where and when somebody is at a particular place, at a particular time, in a particular vehicle, with a particular person. I mean, it's amazingly great tool to build timelines.
How accurate cell phone data, though, right? I mean, we talk about that in so many cases. Brian Kohberger case, we've spoken a lot about that. How accurate is cell phone data?
It is accurate. I mean, and it's getting more accurate all the time. Just like GPS used to be not so accurate, now it's much more accurate. And with technology, and I, like you know, that I was a juror on a murder trial with special circumstances here in California last year. I was the jury foreman, and we had a lot of cell phone data in that case, and they tracked the person, the suspects. There was 6 suspects in the conspiracy, and they tracked their movements with their texts. And again, it's a piece. It's not determinative. It's a piece, but when you marry it up with other things like text or like a car going by on a security camera, it helps you build all of that together. So even if it's not directly accurate to like a foot of where the person is, you can certainly see movement. And when you marry that with video or you marry that with eyewitness data or eyewitness statements, that really helps you kind of fill out the picture.
And it's not just the data, the location data. When the phone is turned on and off. Why do I say that? I'll explain. Because it's during this time that authorities say Shover messaged his older brother, Gary Shover, on Facebook, writing, quote, "Be ready for tonight. Get shovels and lighter fluid ready." Before I get back into the cell phone evidence, Bobby, how many times do you see suspects blatantly write messages like this? I mean, what were they expecting?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because it's the only way we communicate anymore, right? These kids don't even like to talk on the phone. Like
Right.
phones were made to talk, and they're actually anxious. They don't like to. I've actually had young people where I communicate with them, and they go, "Just text me. Why are you calling me?" Like, you know, because we like voice communications, we like face-to-face communications, and they actually prefer text. They're more comfortable texting, not realizing that, you know, that text is now a record of that communication somewhere, just like writing it down. In the case where I was on the jury, I mean, they deleted all those texts, but they recovered them. The computer experts recovered the deleted texts and they used them at trial. So yeah, these kids are more comfortable texting than they literally are talking.
Okay, going back to the cell phone evidence. So from there, this prosecutor's brief, explains that Shover ends up picking up his brother. They head to the San Bernardino Mountains, and between 8:33 p.m. and 10:14 p.m., he turns off his phone. Owen Shover turns off his phone and it only comes back on after he's back at his father's house. So making that correlation once again to the Brian Kohberger case, where we talk about the prosecutors say there he deliberately turns off his phone and it's off during the key moments of the killings and then comes back on afterwards. When you turn your phone off and when you turn it off on, or even if it's not that, it just, you know, because defense attorneys would say, Bobby, right? Well, you can't prove he turned it off. It wasn't responding to the network at that time. But again, it's not responding at that key time. That in and of itself could be stronger evidence than if it was on and you're pinpointing his location.
Absolutely. It speaks volumes. I mean, look, again, you look at behavior patterns. My phone, for example, it's never off. It's on the rare occasion when the battery dies, but I have it charging at my desk. I have it charging in my car. At night when I go to sleep, it sits in a charger on my nightstand. So it's never really off, you know, unless it's rebooting after it dies, the battery dies. And that's rare these days because we carry charging bricks everywhere. And this kid now is of a younger age and he lives on his phone even more than we do. And it's 8 to 10 o'clock at night. This is prime time, kids talking to each other. You wouldn't be turning your phone off at that time. He's also texting at that just before it happens and texting after. So it's like this big black hole that in and of itself doesn't say anything, but in the context of everything else says a lot.
And today's day and age, if you leave your phone at home, that could be suspicious, right? You leave your phone at home to say, oh, it's not tracking me, it's on. But if you're caught on camera, if you're caught on surveillance camera, or someone takes a picture of you on a social media, then it becomes a social media message. Then it's very suspicious you left your phone at home. So Aranda's family, their friends, they file these missing persons reports, and this becomes a homicide investigation when they find all of this evidence. But they also find something else. They find the possible presence of a significant amount of blood that had been pooled toward the bottom of the trunk of Owen Shover's car, underneath the carpeting. They used luminol. Bobby, explain to us how this works.
Well, luminol is a chemical, and Blue Star is a brand name that they spray. It's like a spray bottle, and it activates enzymes within blood, and that it kind of makes what you have to do is when you spray it, you use a blue light, and the blue light is the frequency of light that can show the reaction that's taking place between luminol. It's made to react only with certain enzymes that are in human blood or animal blood as well. So you spray it. You wait a little bit and then you use a black light and you look over, and everybody's kind of familiar with those old black lights that you use, and you can see other things. It's not only blood, semen, urine, a lot of bodily fluids it kind of reacts with. And so that's what they do. So even if it's cleaned up or even if it doesn't look like there's blood there, luminol can actually raise those images with a black light and you can see it. And then you can swab it and take it to the lab and test it.
Is there any way to actually fully clean up blood?
Yeah, there are, but it's extensive and you have to have a lot of expertise and you have to have a lot of time to do it. You know, people try to use bleach. There are ways, but it's extensive and you have to know how to do it. In the case of a trunk, there are lots of, you know, nooks and crannies and crevices. Even in this case, the locking mechanism on the trunk, the investigators broke it open. So that's where the key goes in, right? You have little slots and things. And when blood seeps in there, if blood seeps in there and you clean the lock on the outside without taking it apart, there's blood inside that locking mechanism that you don't see because, you know, it's enclosed. So when the investigators opened that and looked at all the gearing in there and works, they found blood even in there. So that's a kind of thing where even when you clean it up, you think it's clean to the human eye, it's not. There's still blood there.
And they also apparently found DNA, her DNA in his car too, which on one hand confirms what the eyewitnesses saw, what the social media posts were. DNA is tricky though, right? Because can it tell you exactly when the DNA was placed there, how specific the spots were? DNA is very important, but it's not as precise as certain other methods. Or maybe it is. You tell me.
It's not in situations where the killer and the victim, the alleged killer and the victim know each other.
Right.
When a
Right.
husband kills a wife, his DNA is going to be all over the house.
Right.
When you find Brian Kohlberger's DNA in the murder room of that house in Idaho, that's important because why would he have been there, ever in there? So it's more important when the killer doesn't know the victim. It's less important when the killer knows the victim because those people, their DNA should be in places where they were together.
Yeah, but yeah, and this just double confirms or triple confirms that she was in that car. Now, what happens? Owen Skylar Shover, now 23 years old, goes to trial and he is convicted of first-degree murder. It takes the jury just over a day to deliberate, and they even find a special circumstance allegation of lying in wait. This is an aggravating circumstance, an aggravating factor, and he now faces life in prison without the possibility of parole when he's sentenced in October. Based on everything I've laid out, Bobby, not a surprise, right?
No, it didn't take the jury very long. I mean, you had a lot of evidence here. His text, the blood, her blood in the car, his obtaining the weapon. Yeah, there was a lot of evidence here. His brother actually pled guilty
Yeah.
prior to this.
I mentioned it. So his 27-year-old brother, Gary Shover, pleads out, admits he's an accessory after the fact. He's sentenced to only 12 months felony probation, though. Is that weird?
It is weird to me. When I read the reporting on it, apparently there was a preliminary hearing where the judge threw out those charges, the more serious charges, and then he pled to a much lesser charge, and he got, I think, a year time served and a year probation. So yeah, that did, that did surprise me with such a light sentence. But I may think there may have been problems with that case because the judge actually dismissed those charges. Now sometimes they dismiss them at the DA's request, so they can actually insert a different charge for the plea bargain. But I don't know the details of that. But it did seem like a light sentence to me.
And I can't confirm at this point if he was a cooperating witness of some kind. I can't confirm that. Obviously, I think that, or I wouldn't be surprised about that when you look at the plea and the sentence. But if he did have a role in what happened here, again, it seems like a strange sentence, but that's what the reporting indicates. I want to end with this, and this is the most important question. There have been, Bobby, extensive searches of these mountains, but they haven't been able to find Aranda. Why?
Well, I live here near those mountains. I see those mountains from my house. This is a area of California that's over 2,000 square miles, these mountains, and they are rugged terrain. We've had situations before where people disappear. We had an FBI agent actually commit suicide up in some mountains in California, and it took forever to find his, by months, 3-4 months, and we had everybody out searching. These are difficult mountains to search. This is rugged terrain. They do it by helicopter in a lot of places because it's too steep to get in there. Now, how he was able to hide her body, because by no account is he an avid hiker or an outdoorsman. So I don't know how he was able to hide her. I assume she was buried because on his property, they did find some burned out clothes and blankets buried on his property. So, he has a habit maybe of burying things. So I assume he buried her. And if you're searching by helicopter, you're not going to see, buried. Sometimes you can see it if the ground is disturbed, but if he covered it up well enough, it's really, really difficult places to search.
And burning, right? If someone's burned, that can be, although there are cases where you can find the fragments of human remains even when someone's burned, but that makes it incredibly difficult as well to try to find some remains.
Yeah, well, if he buried her in a shallow grave and set her on fire and burned her, and then covered her up, what that does is it eliminates animals from going in there and digging her up. A lot of times, animals will dig up a buried body and then they're found because of that. But if she's burned well enough, and then covered up, animals won't do that. And so that's another reason. That's what we call a forensic countermeasure. So that's another reason why she may have not been found. Those mountains are vast and they're very rugged. If he was able to get her in to a place where people don't or normally hike, then it may be, who knows if she's ever going to be found.
Now, before we let you go, we did have the opportunity to speak briefly with Matthew Horscati, who is Aranda's uncle. And unfortunately, we couldn't schedule an interview with him, but he did provide us some information that I want to share with you to give you a better sense about who Aranda was. He said that Aranda had a very infectious smile, that she could light up a room, that she knew how to draw, she was very intelligent, she loved to work, to go to school. Her teacher said that she was on track to graduate early. One time she said that she wanted to become a tattoo artist because she could draw freehand. There were a lot of things that she wanted to do, but unfortunately, she never got a chance to accomplish them. She loved working. She worked at Charlie's Philly Cheesesteak in the mall, and he said he's pretty sure that she would have been a manager by now, that she had ambitions, that she was full of life, that she wanted to accomplish things, but again, she won't be able to do that. Now, he indicated he's pleased with the verdict against Shover. He's hoping for life in prison. But he also said that Shover has never said where he put Aranda's body and that he wishes that he would so that the family could have some sense of peace. And he says if he could talk to him, he'd ask him where he put his niece. Again, really, really sad conclusion to this case. All right, Bobby, so there you have it. Thank you so much for coming on. Really, really sad case, but appreciate your perspective and expertise as always, my friend. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Jesse.
That's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.